Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome back to our webinar series. This time we'll be covering global solutions, so international placements. I don't know how many of you are excited about that, have already endeavored to jump into that or are currently doing that, but we have two experts here that we could pick their brain and get some insight into kind of what that entails. So if you're an agency owner for whom you would like to start doing international placements, you are in the right place. We have the amazing Allison of Pink Nannies and the wonderful Susan of Apex Social here to give us just a little bit of insight into the world of international placement. So we're going to jump right into it. And my first question is, what are the key steps involved in conducting international nanny placements? Anybody feel like taking that?
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question. And so a little bit about myself. So I own Pink Nannies. We are a domestic staffing agency. We're nationwide, but we also do international placements. Primarily, we do domestic, but I'm also familiar with international. And so I would say when you are looking into a family and a family is interested in international, of course, you're going to assess your client's needs. So you start that by conducting that thorough consultation with the family to understand their specific requirements. There's, of course, preferences. There's going to be culture considerations. You're going to gather some information about their childcare needs, their household dynamics, some expectations, and that really encompasses the nanny role. Also, you're going to really utilize those international networks. So job boards, you're going to source qualified nanny candidates from very diverse backgrounds and different cultures. You're going to conduct the background checks. So reference verifications, the detailed interviews to ensure that the candidates really meet the family's criteria and align with the childcare philosophies. And then there's also a lot of legal and regulatory compliance. So you're going to navigate those associated with the international placements, including like the visa regulations. There's immigration laws. There's going to be employment regulations. And then I would say like the next step in that process is you're going to assist the candidates in like navigating the visa application process, which can be pretty tedious. You're going to provide really comprehensive support for their relocation to the destination of the country. At Pink Nannies, we also offer guidance on immigration procedures, documentation requirements, relocation logistics to really facilitate with a smooth transition. And you're going to really navigate those cultural compatibility assessments. So really evaluate those cultural compatibilities between the family and the nanny through compatibility interviews. And when I say compatibility is there's a lot of cultural differences in childcare practices depending on where you're going or where you're placing this candidate. There's a lot of communication styles. There's a lot of social norms to ensure a really harmonious match. So I would say that those are like the really big things that we really navigate when we get to know a family.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Susan, did you have anything you wanted to add into that or onto
Yeah, I
that?
think that's everything that you have said. I can totally subscribe to, the process that you outlined. And in my experience, I've been running Apex Social Group for the last 16 years. And just last year, stepped down as the CEO. And my number two is now the CEO. She's doing a phenomenal job. And over the last 16 years, we have placed about 3,000 young people, teachers, nurses, therapists from one country, mostly from Europe, into the United States or into Australia. And within the last several years, started also adding young American placements from one part of the country into another part of the country. So our experience is really focused on mostly from Europe coming to the United States or from Europe going to Australia. I did have some experience placing in countries like Dubai, England, Canada, Saudi Arabia, like the UK, just to name a few. Also some placements for families that are traveling around the world. And what I found is that these specialty country placements, so to speak, they take my team probably 5 times as much time than the process that we already know.
Yeah.
So going into a new country and doing international placements, they are very exciting because it's new and maybe it's interesting for you as the agency owner, but you have to be also in consideration of how much time will it take your team to figure out all the loose ends. So when doing international placements, it's very important to understand why are you doing them, and what is your, what is your inner drive, your reason for doing international placements, because international placements come not just with a great excitement and with some money attached to it, they also come with a great deal of risk of all the things that you don't know when you don't know that you don't know. So yeah, with that, I want to make sure we have enough time for questions around that. If somebody has questions in the chat, I'm happy to share anything that we have learned in the last 15 years with our team. We're 65 staff members that work in 11 different countries. So we're really culturally averse, with a focus on German/European culture, American culture, and Australian culture. Because what Alison touched on, it's very clear that cultural differences are very big,
Yes.
where.
So can I spin off of that? What
Sure.
strategies do you use to ensure cultural competency or compatibility between the nannies that you're placing and the families that you're placing them in?
So we did at some point thought that I'm venturing out from my German American approach. So I only had to deal kind of with two cultures, Germany and America, into different countries, because there was a few years where we had a shortage of candidates, and we're like, oh, maybe we need to going and recruit in Mexico and Bogota and China and the Philippines and like all these other countries. So we worked with 16 different countries, which was exciting again, a nightmare to figure out visa. So the timing was like 5 times as much for my team to figure out. And then when we brought them here, we thought that we understood because it sounded similar, but it was completely different. Like, for instance, when a German says, I'm going to be there at 2, or if I say, can you be there at 2, the Germans will be there 10 minutes before 2. If you ask the Chinese one, can you be there at 2? They say yes, but that yes only means, yes, I heard you, not I will be there, or I will be there even 10 minutes before. We learned this the hard way. So if your team is not experienced on what the cultural differences are, it's going to be a little bit tricky to make successful placements. So me being German, so I lived in Germany for 30 years, then I came here, then I worked in finance here a long time ago, and then I started my agency, so I'm giving away my age a little bit, so that's okay. But for me, understanding the German-American traps, that, the Germans need really strict, direct communication, and not the American beat around the bush. Oh, if you get to it by 4, maybe you can unload the dishwasher. What the mom really says is, I need to have the dishwasher unloaded by 4. So if you're not giving that straightforward conversation to the Germans, they may or may not get to it, right? Because that's what the mom said. So all these little things are very important in understanding the different cultures. And then when I sent them in other countries, like in Dubai, that was, one of a very high profile family, and we made a placement, and I thought, wow, we're providing so much value, and the placement fee was great and everything. And then after a while, I realized, like, oh my God, I'm in over my head. And I ultimately kind of like refunded everything, kind of helped the family to make the decision that it's not a good fit, and had the candidate come back home, because I couldn't really understand for sure how everything was. So I was like very happy that this one was had a good end, but it ended after 2 weeks, because I saw all the red flags once that placement was actually in place, with the servant mentality and the culture and the impact. So there's a lot of things to consider, I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's a lot of things that we've gone through, try and error, because I want to serve everybody. When the mom comes and like, have this child, and it's like on the autistic spectrum, and I want to help them, and they're in the UK, or they're in Dubai, or they're in other countries. I want to help, because I think we feel we can help, but then do we really have the team in place to have all the structures done? That's a big question.
Yeah. And, I can kind of touch on that. Like in Saudi Arabia, we did an international placement about 6 months ago in Saudi Arabia. And it's very different. So you have to ensure that the nanny really understands the basic Islamic practice. Like there's prayer time, there's Ramadan fasting, there's a lot of dietary restrictions, and they also eat, it's called halal food. And it's when like they pray over their food and they can't eat anything that is not prayed over. Um, and so it's, it's not my belief. So it was very interesting to learn that side of it. There's also very specific gender roles in many households, like the men and the women like have very distinct responsibilities and social interactions. Like in a gathering, the women stay to like in one room and the men are in a separate room. And so that's, these are all things that can really affect a candidate if they're not fully aware of it. Women, they dress incredibly modestly. They wear, clothing up to their shoulders and down to their knees, like a bathing suit. A nanny just going in a bathing suit, where we're used to it here in the United States, they can't wear a bathing suit. They actually have to wear like a wetsuit. And so it's just very different. And so to have an individual who is being placed internationally over there, they have to understand those norms that they have. Also, when you walk into a room in a group of Muslims, they like every single person stands up to greet this person. And if you don't stand up, it's incredibly rude. And you actually have to go to every single person and say hi to them and shake their hand. Women cannot look men in the eyes. So it's just it was a
It's
very
complex.
it's
It's
very
very
complex.
and the
Every international
expectation
placement is.
management, it's hard. And if you as the individual are interested in learning this, for all means, go for it.
Mhm.
But if you want to try to do it as a repeatable and systematic approach, so you can help more than just the one-off where you're basically hovering over this one placement for a long period of time, something to consider.
Absolutely. How do you navigate the legal and regulatory requirements as it pertains to international placements? If someone has never done those before, where could they find, or what things should they be aware of as it pertains to the legalities of international placements and the regulatory procedures of international placements?
Yeah, I think there's two things that I want to address before we go into it. It's like, one is if we're talking about an international placement, that is an international candidate coming to the United States to work. And then the other version is having a young American or any American childcare provider going international. And then the third option is it doesn't have to do anything with the United States. If we're talking about today as mostly US domestic agency owners, if we're placing, let's say, a nanny from England with a family in Germany or in Europe or in Australia. So like doing truly international placements outside the United States territory. So that has multiple factors. Where we usually start is with the understanding what the family's basic needs are in terms of their location, where they're employing the nanny, where they wanted to travel, which countries does it affect, and that is usually limiting our availability of the candidates from different countries because of their visa status, and if their passport is easily being eligible for visas in the countries that they want to travel to. So those are all considerations to look into. So there's employment. Well, think about if you have a US domestic placement, all the things that you have to ensure with the home payroll services, that the nanny is eligible to work, that she has everything set up, that the taxes are paid, that everything is legal. The same steps you have to take in each country. So in each country, you can find that out, what the requirements are there. And it's a little bit complex in each country. So I'm familiar with Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the UK, Australia, and of course, the United States, like most of us.
Yeah, and I would say, like, for anyone who's really interested in this, the first step that we did is we partnered with a legal advisor in a firm that really specialized in international employment law and immigration. And, you want to be compliant with all the relevant laws and regulations. the legal expert that we hired, they really provided us with guidance on that visa requirement, on those work permits. We have a contract for all of our domestic placements, but the contract for international placements are very different. And it depends on, which country they're going to. So the legal considerations are very specific to international placements. So I would say that would be the first step, is definitely the legal expertise.
So if you were branching out, Susan just said that they are, you could take it three ways, from a United States candidate, being placed internationally, placing an international candidate here in the United States, or placing a candidate that has nothing to do with the United States. If someone were jumping into this, if we have an agency owner watching today for whom they're looking to foray into this, this line of business, which would you say would be the most legitimate process or path for them to take? Should they look into placing a United States nanny internationally, an international candidate within? Which one of those would you say would be the best path, Allison?
So for me, it's definitely a U.S. employee. I'm sorry, a U.S. citizen, to then transfer over to another country. That is probably the easiest for me, just because that is our database. I am a domestic staffing agency, and we specialize nationwide. So our candidate pool is really large here in the United States, where my candidate pool in Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi or, Dubai, so, that's my personal opinion.
Yes, ma'am. Susan, what would you say?
Yeah, totally. I mean, start with where you have, something to work with.
Yes.
So if you have a great talent pool and they are looking for more opportunities than you can give them, that's a great way to start.
I like that. Candy had a question in the chat, and she was wondering if we had a candidate for whom they were not well versed in the culture that they might be joining for this position, what types of trainings, or where could you find trainings for them to attend so that they could gain knowledge on the specific culture that they will be joining?
I can speak for the Australian one. So we did our own training by having people that lived in Australia for some period of time, but are coming from different countries because they're most aware of what the differences are and how to coach the people through this. So we have an extensive online training academy and then live training before they go abroad.
Gotcha.
So that's one of the ways that we're doing it. And then the same way we're focusing on the cultural differences between two different cultures, like the sending and the receiving culture.
There's also a lot of different apps that you can use. So there's language barriers. Well, there's language classes, there's transitional tools, there's Rosetta Stone, there's Babbel. So depending on where they're going, there's a lot of apps that can help them. There's also Facebook groups, there's blogs, there's YouTube channels, there's local communities. So, depending on where they're going to, there's a lot of resources, and that agency can help you to navigate what you can download or where you can go for the community and the resource to, acquire those needs.
I love that. What strategies do you use to source qualified candidates from someone outside of the United States? So if we're sourcing from the UK or from Australia, what strategies can you use to source international candidates for your position?
So the INA is a great one. It's the International Nanny Association.
Talk about it.
So, for me, that's really great. A lot of the resources that we use there's something called cultural au pair, and it's also for au pairs, but it is also for nannies as well. You can do that. You can do LinkedIn. There's going to be, your Facebook paid ads. You can write a blog about, an international where, let's just say they're going to Europe. You can write a blog about Europe and how someone's transitioning into that lifestyle. And you can see how many people are going to be interested. You could also put a little blurb at the bottom that, if you're interested in taking part of this culture, contact Pink Nannies, or, whatever it might be.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, that's super. We have developed over the last 15, 16 years, strong partnerships with educational schools. because we found that the kind of people that we were looking for were not the career nannies that are looking for long-term career placement, because we wanted to, because we have our vision is combined to empower the kids and the families, but also the caregiver that is on their journey on a childcare development journey. So people that already have taken coursework towards psychology, therapy like OT, PT, speech, behavioral health, nursing, teaching, because those young professionals and those professions typically don't get to travel much as part of their education, leave alone a paid trip, right? A paid work assignment. And we wanted to change this. So I started to partner with the educational institutions in Germany and Austria and Switzerland for nurses, therapists, teachers, and starting at their recruiting time into the school, my team and my alumni, they're there with them, recruiting them into their programs. And then as they're going through the programs, they're being nurtured by our, cultural awareness sessions and how cool it is to, live for a year in San Francisco or in Boston or in Texas, or like just opening their mind on how different people live around the world, especially around the US and Australia. Those are the two countries that we're focusing on. And so we had really great success working with those schools and educating them on the possibility to come to the US and to Australia, because those are people that are coming for a 1 or 2 year assignment before they go off and then start their own practice or taking full-time work in a therapy practice or in a kindergarten or in a hospital or in a school. So that's our niche and approach, because we found it very hard placing like live-in care professionals. It takes a lot to obey to somebody else's rule in their home. And we found that for a couple of years, any young person can do it because the payoff is so high that they're so excited about the new things they learn, the new environment they're in, the travel opportunity they're in. And I feel like long-term live-in is so hard on the caregiver.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so difficult to staff those live-in, situations. And we have the specialty that we're focusing mostly, I would say 80% of our families have kids with a diagnosis or a developmental delay or autism, or so that's another aspect that we're special. It was really a niche and a niche and a niche. International live-in special needs, and then you're down to a very small set of compared to the typical nanny agency placement.
But I really like your approach, Susan and Allison. I really like systems. I think putting systems in place versus like this, hoping that you can just find these one-offs in these different places. I really like partnering. I found in our agency that has worked well for us. I really like speaking to that, whether you're partnering with INA or partnering with different educational facilities, creating a system that works well for you to create recurring candidate pools for you that feed them and funnel them basically into the line of business that you need them to be in. I really like your thought process on using newer interns and those that are new to that field, because I do find that to be actually so valuable and vital. The fact that the newness does help them to stay in a position a little bit longer than some of our career nannies. It is very difficult to find someone who's looking to stay in a home in that type of situation for a long time. So I think that that's really, really insightful. What would you say are the best practices for managing the relocation process? So you find a candidate, say outside of the United States, and we're bringing them into the United States. How do you typically manage the relocation process, and what are the typical benefits, or what things are you looking to generally provide through that process?
So in our relocation process coming into the United States, we're bringing them in on the J1 au pair visa. So, but we're not bringing in 18-year-old high school students that are becoming babysitters. We're looking exclusively for degree nurses, teachers, therapists. They're in their mid-20s. And so when they come here, our package is set up very transparent upfront. So they don't have basically any cost upfront, and we pay for everything until they get to the family, and then the family takes on room and board and are paying them associated to the local laws. So in each state it's different. And so the benefits package for them is really, or the way we're describing it when we're going to the schools, what the opportunity looks like is you have no cost. We pay for your health insurance, we pay for your flight, we pay for your visa, you get assistance, we train you up front, you get support before you come, during the matching. Once you have an offer in hand, you know exactly how much you're going to make, you know exactly where you're going to live, you know exactly what the benefits package is from the family directly, you know that you're getting health insurance from us, you're legal, you have your work, your visa, that you can work for the specific family. And then we book the flight, they arrive, the family picks them up, and we're doing our orientation within 48 hours in the home with the family. And so the relocation package is really, we've done it now over 3,000 times. We'll really have it done, you know. It's it's a repeatable process. This works.
Yeah. Allison?
Allison, how are you doing it?
So, and I love the way that you're doing that. So for us, we actually provide, we require the family to provide our candidates with a minimum of a $10,000 relocation assistance. So the family is responsible for reimbursing the flights and all the booking, traveling, logistics, and arrangements. If they require the candidate to do it themselves, they have to reimburse her for all the expenses. But once the candidate arrives, and let's say that the trial period's going great and they have found their housing and, you know, all the logistics have lined up for this candidate to be hired, what we do is we encourage the family to show the candidate around the local area, give her a tour of the home and the city. And we actually recommend that the family help a candidate to open a bank account wherever they're residing. And we help the family create a list of emergency contacts, nearby hospitals, clinics, the family's physician. So those are the ways that we help facilitate it, but we really rely on the family to do all of that for us with our guidance.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. We actually have staff in each location that is kind of like the local manager, you know, one Apex Care and Development manager. So we have one in Boston, we have one in New Jersey, one in Florida, one in San Francisco, one in, you know, Southern California. And they are working with our we call them care professionals, while they're here on a J1 au pair visa, but we call them care professionals to make sure that they're differentiated to the typical, you know, high school student that is coming for a gap year. So the care professionals then being guided to apply for their social security number with our visa documents, the bank account, like you mentioned. So we point out how they apply for a bank account, but then let the family guide which bank they would prefer. So it's easy for, you know, transactions. We make sure that they're set up with home pay service so that the taxes are taken care of. And all the local things will be handled by the local support person. So our local manager, because we have clusters from like 5 to 35 people in each city. And so that also creates a great community for the international person to come here to not get homesick and want to go home. Because the worst thing is that you can do as an agency owner, you do all this effort and then they get here and then they're so homesick and they have nobody locally. That's a terrible situation. You know, even with getting so much money, the money doesn't make them happy, you know? So it's our support to help them adjust their mindset, that they get to experience it, that they get to work through this uncomfortable feeling and getting comfortable in the uncomfortable until it gets comfortable again. So that's a very, very critical point for agency owner to make sure that the placement holds. Otherwise, the nanny comes and 3 months later, maybe not, they're not even making it to the 3 months mark. They're like, I can't do it, I quit, I leave, and you can't hold them hostage, right? So when they come here, they're free to leave anytime. Doesn't matter how much the family paid us.
Absolutely.
Now, Susan, I actually have a question on that. How does your agency provide emotional support to those candidates adapting to the new country?
Oh, that's a big one. So what we do is we use, I talked about it before in APNA conferences. We use the personality assessment from Dr. Hartman, the color code, and I can provide a link in the meeting notes for all of you to take it for free for yourself to find out what it is. It's a color code that is independent of your culture, independent of your country, independent of your male, female level of education. The color code is asking questions about how you made decisions, behaved as a child, as far as you can remember, because that gives you an insight on what nature gives you. And nature gives every human a set package of strengths and limitations for different personality traits. So nature has the opportunity to give 4 different colors, and in each color it could be up to 15 strengths and up to 15 limitations. And nature does like whatever they want, so it's a very unique fingerprint, but the maturity of those traits make you unique color. And so you can identify, is this person from the core red, blue, yellow, white?
Yeah.
And the red is the 30 seconds A to B, lead, follow, get out of my way, motivated by I have to produce, I have to do something. The blues are the quality-oriented people that we a lot of times see in our caregivers because they want to be in service, they want to help, they want to provide that quality care. They have this really emotional, intrinsic need to help. The yellows are the fun-seeking people. And then you have the white people, not from a skin color, but from an intrinsic white personality, that they're seeking peace and harmony. They're very logical. They see very much what's going on, but if they're potentially put in a situation of conflict, they will not open their mouth. They will not tell you. They will just quietly, leave. And once you know what their core strengths and motivations are, then you can understand which person would be a good fit for the position you're trying to fill. Gotcha. And we have all of our clients, our host families, take those as well. So we explain to them, like, look, you're hiring somebody remote, and you don't get to hang out and have lunch with them or see how they're interacting with your kids. This is a very proven concept for us, where we can give you insight on somebody's wants and needs, each other, that you are both making an educated decision, that you know what you're getting yourself into. And by taking it yourself, you see what you learn about yourself and what you learn about your household, your family, your husband, your kids, what kind of personality fits best within your family union. And then we can have the conversation with each care professional on what to expect, and also with the families what to expect when things are getting rough. Because for international placement, there's no question in my mind if there's going to be stress or cultural, homesickness, cultural shock. That's just a question when. And you need to know when somebody gets into stress. And the color code gives you very early indicators, and then both can laugh about it and say, oh, look, I guess I'm having these symptoms. Apex talked about it in the beginning. They're like, oh yeah, these are the strategies that we're applying now. So the blues need something else than the reds, than the yellows, and then the whites. The whites just disappear in their room for the weekend.
I love that so much, Susan. I think that when I was working in education and we dealt with ESL students, they did like so much instruction around this about, just that transitional phase for anyone that's new to the United States and kind of what that looks like. And so I feel like that maybe that's a component, as Allison was bringing out, that may be overlooked in international placements, is the emotional support that's necessary to make sure that you have a whole human caring for little humans, and making sure that everyone ends up on the right side of that situation. Jackie asked a question, does the family, this is for Allison, because your family held the cost of a lot of the relocation, does the family also take care of the expenses related to the expiration of the position?
Yes, it's in their contract. When
What
the
is
candidate signs,
expiration? You
when
mean
they're
the end
departing
of
from
the returning home? Oh, yeah.
if a family's not to extend a candidate and they were to be let go for a reason, for any reason whatsoever, it's in a contract. Whether they're terminated for cause or not, they still have to pay for their fee to come home.
Gotcha. Perfect. How do you handle language barriers between international nannies and their host families?
Rosetta Stone.
I'm here for
That's
the Rosetta.
that's like my go-to. I always tell candidates, like, if you're interested, like, if you want to speak Arabic, you should, sign up for Rosetta Stone, learn the language,
Mhm.
get in contact with communities here. So before you're taking on a placement, you're
Right.
getting to know a little bit more about the culture. There's going to be, different ways and different lingo that
Mhm.
people use. So like, whether they're like East or West, they can have different, not tangs, but there's different tones of like how people speak. So it just depends. But I think Rosetta Stone is my go-to.
I love it.
Yeah, we have English training.
Mhm.
So all Germans, they have like 9 years of school English. So their English is fine. Every
Mhm.
German will tell you immediately, oh, my English is not that good. Yeah, fine. Your English is fine. Just practice
Mhm.
and get comfortable in the uncomfortable
Mhm.
and just start speaking. And so we have an English coach that is actually like a purser for Lufthansa that loves working with our young. So instead of coaching the young flight attendants, she's coaching our young care professionals before they get on their first long distance flight to
Mhm.
really get comfortable in the English and what is nappies versus diapers and like all these different words that they may have learned in school that are not used in the US language, but in the UK. So there's a lot of possibilities, but then we recommend Netflix, 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 turn on your local language, put on the subtitles, and just immerse yourself.
Mhm.
The more you immerse yourself before you even go to your placement, the better it is. And if you have somebody on your team that understands the culture, that's a huge benefit. If you understand the culture from both parties,
Mhm.
your success in the placement is usually much higher.
I would agree. What would you say are the general expectations around salaries, benefits, and working conditions for international placements?
That's a very interesting point. Expectation on the family side or expectation on the candidate side?
Expectations
Because
on the candidate side.
expectation on the candidate side. Huh. Well, I can tell you that from the expectation for the candidates coming from Germany,
Mhm.
so we're looking at a comparable rate on what they would be making in Germany,
Mhm.
less the fact that they don't have to pay for house, room and board.
Yeah.
That's perceived as a benefit if you're only coming for a year or two. So you don't
Mhm.
have to set up everything.
Mhm.
Typically, if you have a long-term caregivers, that would be a negative because they would have, they still would have their own place to live and then they would go and stay there just for convenience of the employer.
Right.
But for the way we set it up as part of a cultural exchange,
Mhm.
we're working with our caregivers that their expectations are not in the, $40, $50 an hour rate, even if they're like a nurse from Germany or, master's degree teachers or therapist coming here.
Mhm.
So the overall cost to the families, it's much more in the, $25 to $35 an hour rate.
Gotcha. Do you find that it's difficult, easier or more difficult to place US nannies internationally than it is to bring other nannies and place them in the United States? Allison's nodding her head.
Yes, absolutely. And also I do want to touch what we do is a little bit different from Susan on the past or on the previous question. Where you
I
said
was interested in that too. What your background experience is.
Yeah, so we actually won't. Well, first of all, international nannies, they earn compensation packages that are substantially higher than what they would earn here in their home country. So overall, the goal is to really offer a competitive compensation package that is incredibly lucrative, but also competitive
Yeah.
to attract and retain those quality candidates. So we won't take on an international role unless they're making over $100,000. And that is inclusive of their benefits, health, dental, vision stipend, housing, etc.
Mhm.
That's for us at least.
Mhm.
But yeah.
And then the the relocation package would be in addition to that, so that's not
It's
coming out of the
inclusive.
paycheck?
So it's inclusive of their total comp. Their total comp has to be over 100K for us to really work on that role.
What's the highest pay rate that you have seen with international placement, like annual comp?
So I placed in Saudi Arabia and the comp was 188,000.
Very cool.
What would you say are, so we talked about culture differences in the home and with parents. Are there any notable ones that you can just recall off the top of your head as it pertains to childcare practices that are really things that you keep in mind when you're placing?
Big time. The Germans are much more organized. And it's almost, think about it, a preschool where you have one teacher and 6 or 7 kids. If every kid does the same, does their own thing and is not listening, and they're not putting their foot down at some point and said, these are the rules, you know, gentle reinforcement, they're running all over them. So when the Germans typically come, they're much more organized and structured than most parents are set off or set up to do or envision their child rearing. It's also, I figure, I was wondering why that is, and just for myself, I was not trained as a childcare as a parent, you know. Nobody of us gets a handbook when we have a baby.
Talk about
I wish, you know, we would.
Now, Susan, do you actually find that that's the same in like in the British culture where like the manners and etiquette are really hyper focused for the children?
Yes. Yes. So it's very important to find out what the family's vision is for how they want to raise their kids, and then find a caregiver that is fine, that is good, that is thriving in that kind of vision. Because if the family wants to, oh no, we never use the word no, and that's just going to create conflict with the wrong caregiver if the caregiver cannot operate under this unstructured situation. So it's,
I think that's very, very I think that's very valuable information. I know that when we were dealing with some families in India, it was a lot of things that we learned through their homes that I still actually use in my home, actually. I thought it was wonderful. But some of the cultural implications of things that I remember, we had a young child and they went outside, and I got a call, I got a call from the mom, and she was like, I can't have my child getting darker out in the sun. Like, he needs to come inside. And it was such a thing. Like, they didn't want them to be getting darker, and just things like that that aren't, there's no handbook for that. There's no.
I don't even have it on my
What
radar.
culture is this?
Indian.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and just those types of things, you know, cleanliness is next to godliness. And so all those kinds of things really play a part. I remember we did a birthday party for a family, and the baby was in all white for an outdoor party after it had rained and was muddy. Full white, head to toe white. And they had changes of more and more white clothing for this child. And in between every change, he took a bath. Like, we showered him and changed him into these other clothes. And so I think that it's so imperative that both we as agency owners and the nannies that we place are really lifelong learners, really curious and open to learning about how other people.
And non-judgmental, you know, and like pack our own judgments, how we would do it with our own kids in the back of our pocket.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not our place, you know, as long as it's safe and nobody is gonna take longer term damage.
Yes.
If the parents want it this way, then that's how they have it.
Oh, yes. I think that it's absolutely, I think international placements both ways are wonderful opportunities for us to expand our minds and our ideals about certain things, because I think we can sometimes get boxed into the way that we do things here in the United States and fail to realize that there are benefits to the ways that other cultures do things. And so I find that agency owners that are curious about that, and like Ms. Susan said, are non-judgmental, nannies that are open to that, learning about that, jumping right in and kind of being a sponge to that. I think that those are the types of individuals that all of us are hoping to work with on an ongoing basis. I have another question. Oh, Candy asked, do you create any nanny groups for the nannies that you place overseas so that they have support when they are away from home?
So I don't place enough international nannies to have a nanny group.
Mm.
But what I do is I recommend there's Facebook groups, there's local communities, and so I'll guide them in those directions.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Susan,
we
you're
have
probably
local,
like,
yeah, without, I mean, if it really depends. If you're doing hundreds of placements a year, that
Mhm.
I mean, we are responsible for them from the day they enter the United States until they leave the United States. And my personal responsibility, I feel like it starts like years before they even come here to make sure that they're prepared. And
Right.
then it also extends beyond the time when they're going back home to make sure that the reverse culture shock is
Right.
also taken care of, because that's not without, that's not for the easy gut, or I don't know, easy stomach. The
Yeah.
reverse culture shock can sometimes be worse than the original culture
Mhm.
shock when you're coming into the new country, because everything's excited, you expect that, but then going home you think like, oh yeah, that's going to be a piece of cake. No, it's not, because you have grown 10x and your environment has been stuck, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, what did I do? Why did I come back?
Mhm.
So getting this smooth re-entry is a very important piece, but coming here without the strong support groups that we've fostered and created, also the connectivity into the community, we wouldn't have been able to keep so many people happy in situations where they cannot just say 5 o'clock, I'm leaving, bye, where they're actually living with the family, where they're in the home, they can leave, but they have to come back because they live there.
Mm.
So it's a very important thing to have a social network in your
Mhm.
local community of like-minded people that are understanding your situation, and
Mhm.
then also making very strong connections into the local community.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
That's
What
why I
are
would love to, anybody that is interested in any of the locations in the US, I would love to also intersect like the
yeah.
international
Mhm.
placements with the American placements, because there's so much to learn from each other. And it's so much fun. Since we started our American placements, where we have people from Texas going to Boston, and then from, Iowa to Florida,
Mhm.
like all these different changes, now they're like, the young Americans feel like, oh my God, I have now a friends group from all these Germans, and now they're going and visiting each other. It's, across the US, but also back into Germany. And
Mhm.
it's just amazing to see how this community of young, childcare professionals
Mhm.
is building up. And I think out of that community also comes the next generation of
Mhm.
agency owners,
Yeah.
and I'm like a big fan of, hey, if you want to start your own agency, I'm the first one to support you. But I can tell you how, but you have to do the work.
Yeah.
If you're not up for doing the work.
Yes.
I think that's so awesome that you act as like a support group, because I think a lot of people that are interested in international placements, they have no idea where to begin.
Mhm.
That was me. I had no idea where to begin. And like, I haven't done a placement in quite some months. But I still have questions. I have concerns. Like even though I've done this 3 times, which isn't a
Mhm.
lot, but I still
Mhm.
kind of dove into this. It's
Yeah.
really nice to know that like you are there to have as a support group for anyone who's really looking to embark on this journey, because it can be daunting.
Mhm.
If you're just a nationwide nanny agency and you want to place international, you have no idea
Yeah.
what
What you're
step to
getting
take
yourself
first.
into.
Yeah, you don't know. And then you do it once and you're like, okay, I kind of got the hang of this.
Yeah.
And then you
I
do it
think
twice.
there's maybe an opportunity for APNA to have a mastermind around
Yeah.
people that are interested in the international, that have experience international, um, you know, placing, because the international does not work if you're not charging enough, because the
Yeah.
work and the risk that is associated with it. I mean, you can do it as a hobby, but then it's not going to be a business.
No.
So
Yeah.
Susan, I actually have a question. What happens if the placement doesn't work out? How do you replace? Or
So we
how
have
long
a
does it take you to
Yeah,
replace?
so we have a 3 months replacement
Okay.
guarantee, that if we cannot find somebody within 3 months, we're basically refunding the prorated, but we're pretty good in having a pool available for
Mhm.
replacement. We just can't guarantee that there's like a There's no gap in between. That's why we love working with temp agency nannies for local staffing to fill those gaps, because we also require, also for our national placements, that there's a 45-hour hard stop on the working hours a week. Otherwise, it's people working more than 45 hours in childcare, if it's not the natural parent, because we're expected to do that, is challenging, because it leads to burnout. It's not good for the family. It's not good for the kids. It's not good for the nanny. It's not good for us as agencies. So we make this, actually, it's a Department of State regulation. We made that as our internal rule also for our young Americans. It's okay to go over once or twice here and there, as long as they're getting some time off set, maybe the following week. But over long periods of time, we try to keep it to 45 hours.
I think that's wonderful. If there's a nanny agency owner on today or who'll be watching this playback and their question is, I would like to jump into this. I'd really like to learn about this. What would the steps that you would encourage them to take this week and this month?
Susan, I'll let you answer that, and then I'll go next.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, first I would sit down and write out why you do what you do, and really question your motivation, why you want to do international placements, and what is your bigger life goal is, and why you want to do, for me, I wanted to do international placement. Give you an example. For me, I wanted to do international placements because I've seen this opportunity that I understand the German culture, I understand the German mindset, I understand the American culture, I understand the American mindset. I've seen it from a mother who worked in investment banking, that the availability for college degreed, educated childcare providers with an international component, in my case, I wanted to have the German speaking because I wanted German culture, was very limited. So there was nothing. I would have paid any amount of money at the time to a nanny agency if they could have figured out how to get me a German pediatric nurse or a German preschool teacher or somebody with an early childhood education degree from Germany. I didn't want to start a business because I wanted to do this as a business and make money doing this. I already had a career versus a starting career. So I did it for myself initially. And then when I retired, I realized that nobody else is doing it. Yes, there's the other au pair agencies who basically bring in high school students, and once here and there are people also degreed. One parent said to me, Susan, when I go to an au pair agencies, there's the needle on the haystack that somebody has a degree and experience, and you have a jar of needles. I'm like, yes, because as a parent, you don't want to have to take the risk that something doesn't work out. You want to know that they have the skill set to do the job, and then you only have to worry about the personality fit and the cultural fit and all the different things that can go wrong as a human being, right? So that was my approach at the time. So I would really recommend anybody that wants to take on this really challenging yet very rewarding direction, because if you're placing internationally, well, guess what? You also have to go there as a business, right? As a business trip. That's right, tax write-offable. So if you need to place in Germany, you need to go to Germany, right?
Right.
You can explain that to the IRS, but your trip to Germany was there to do market research. So those are all really good benefits. So, but being really clear of what you're trying to do, if you're doing it because you really would like to have that experience yourself, if you're only doing it for the money, I think there's other ways to make more money. Doing international placements just for the money, it's not going to work. There's other business models that are much better just for the money.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Allison.
Yeah, I would say like day one, just research and plan. Like identify your target countries that you would like to place in. when I started, I did in competitor analysis.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's really important as well. I created a little business plan. So I outlined my goals, like what they were for my international placements. I also estimated my costs, you know, what were going to be my costs really surrounding litigation and like the legal fees of it. And then I just researched the legal requirements. I also consulted with a legal expert just to make sure that I was going to be doing this placement that I had as a referral, and then you know everything kind of lined up. But my next step after I consulted with the attorney is I really reached out to a lot of potential partners. Like recruiters, there's also other nanny agencies, and I just listed a lot of networks and associations that I could go to try and find a candidate.
Yeah.
And I very quickly realized that this would have to be a United States candidate. And that's why I say it's much easier, because on my very first international placement, I realized that it's a little bit more challenging.
Mhm.
And then, you know, really just the market and outreach for the current candidates that I had are really the steps that I took.
That's so insightful. I hope you all have gleaned as much as I have. I really liked how Allison gave us really actionable steps to make strides forward into, if you're looking to move into international placements. I really like the way that Susan encouraged us to examine our hearts and really know the purpose for which you are moving into this line of business. It is really important that we are purpose driven as entrepreneurs and as business owners, and that we're just not out here just willy-nilly doing the things just to be doing the things. But it's really important that you're walking and aligning in your purpose, and that you're walking in that authentically and genuinely, because that is going to draw and magnetize. We are not for everybody, but we are for our people. We are for our somebodies, and there are people for whom you are specifically for. And so knowing what your purpose is and why you are driven will draw those clients to you, will draw those candidates to you, because you are who you are for, right? There are people for whom only you can help, and there are clients for whom are only going to be drawn to each and every one of you. So I really enjoyed learning about this level of business. I think it's a really broad subject that has a lot of nuances that can in no way be covered in a short hour. But hopefully with the expertise of Miss Allison and Miss Susan, you have learned some things that at least will give you something to chew on to decide if this is an area that you want to move into. And then you have wonderful, wonderful resources in both of these amazing humans. Should you have questions or need more insight or want to know about the pitfalls and downfalls for international placements, they are here as resources. Again, APNA's mission is to be collaborative and to make sure that we are all together building one another up. I love the idea of an international mastermind. We'll be doing that today. Be talking about that. I'm totally into that. Think that was a great idea. And so thank you, each and every one of you, all of you who joined us today. Join us in June as we learn about AI. If you enjoyed the speaker from the INA conference, you're going to want to join us in June, because she'll be with us sharing ways to be effective, to maximize our money, to make our businesses more efficient, and to make sure that we're moving the train along for all of our goals and all of our purposes. Thank you, each and every one of you, again for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye, Susan.
Bye.